the R.M.Williams Outback podcast, bringing to life the characters that feature in Outback magazine and more.
Welcome back. Great to have you here. I'm Terry Cowley, the host of the Outback podcast and a journalist on Outback magazine for a very long time. Let's just leave it at that, shall we? Today I have nabbed the AgriFutures Rural Woman of the Year, Carol Mudford, to talk to me. You'll soon find out all about why Carol won the award late last year, not the least of which is the work she does with Shedway, which promotes mental health in our shearing sheds. An important note, this episode does talk about suicide. For crisis support or suicide intervention services, call Lifeline on 131114 or go to shedway.org.au. Nurse, wool handler, shearer and mental health advocate Carol Mudford is the current AgriFutures Rural Women's Award national winner. It's been a few months since Carol received the award, appearing on the cover of Outback's 164th issue. I'm looking forward to hearing about that experience and all the great work Carol continues to do. So it's great to have her on the Outback podcast. How is it going being the Rural Woman of the Year, Carol?
Being part of the whole process from start to now has been a great experience. There's an incredible group of women behind the award and the history of it, and the alumni and the group of finalists from across the country. We've formed a really lovely, tight group, and the best part has been being part of a strong network of women that do great work for rural Australia.
And what was it like being on the cover of a magazine?
I have friends sending me messages every other day, selfies with their magazine, or my cousins with their kids taking photos of the that's been the best part, actually, seeing the kids getting them from their local news agents. That's been the best. And I think back to when I was a kid, and even the story of shearing as a woman. I never saw women shearing while I was a kid and growing up on a sheep farm. And so for my nieces and nephews and cousins' children to see women like me and other women shearing now, and for that to be in media is really, that's a change from when I was a kid. So it's very humbling and an honour to be part of that story. Yeah.
How did you come to be nominated for the award?
Good question. So I was, this is the strength of the alumni of the Women's Award, which is that a previous winner, Jenny Bradley, is a sheep stud owner, connected to family friends of mine here near Dubbo in Gilgandra, and she heard about what I was doing with Shedway and through an aunt and uncle of mine, and let them know about the award. And so through her support and mentoring, put in an application and went from there. And it's really wonderful that she was able to come to both the state award evening and the national gala dinner in Parliament House in Canberra.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned Shedway, and that's a really important part of your story, and we will come to that. But I thought we might kick off the chat with where the journalist Corinna Balderston kicked off your story in Outback magazine, and she started that with your childhood, and I'll quote, it was a lovely few lines, so I thought I'd quote it. Lulled by bleating sheep and humming handpieces, baby Carol Mudford often slept in a wool bin as her parents Max and Nina ran their shearing shed at Kirban near Gilgandra, New South Wales. With that beginning, sheep and shearing really became part of your sensory experience.
Literally gets under your skin, and so walking back into the sheds, so I was in my mid-30s before I came back to shearing sheds, and walking back in, it was those things that made me feel at home, the smells and the sounds and the noise and the pace as well, and the routine of the day.
Your family moved off farm when you were 8. What are your strongest memories before that time?
Waiting for the school bus with cousins, mustering sheep and cleaning water troughs, chasing roos and horse riding, went to pony club. Sundays was always putting on town clothes, go to church and have a cup of green cordial, morning tea, and really remember, just the daily life of farm life, like having puppies and feeding chooks and 2 younger brothers to run around or run amok with.
So I mentioned when you were 8 you moved, and that was to northeast Victoria. Tell me, where did you go and what happened at that time in your family's life?
We had a brief break travelling with circuses. The circus came through town while we were there in Victoria, and Mum and Dad thought that would be an adventure, so we spent 12 months travelling up and down the east coast of Australia with a travelling circus.
Were you a performer?
Yeah, so as part of that was in shows with the travelling circus. We were the same age as the kids of the circus, so it was a group of about 10 of us, I think. I guess I'm not sure how funny we actually were, but we thought we were the comic act in between the main acts, the sort of diversion, I guess, and part of the grand parade. And so there's lots of jobs in the travelling circus. So Dad was mechanical support for keeping the show on the road, and Mum was groom for some of the animal acts, those horses and camels she was looking after.
What an experience! Your whole family ran away to the circus.
Yeah, and sometimes and it's a funny thing, as you say, it's not a common thing to do, I guess, but doing it as a kid, the best part of it was that made doing something like that normal for us, and that sense of adventure and having a go and doing something different is something both my brothers and I have sort of taken into our lives. I'm really grateful for that. And I was just telling someone, we had our first shearing show, ag show of the year this weekend, and I was telling someone that part of the reason maybe I like following the show circuit is that reminder of the circus carnival background and travelling around a lot in the atmosphere, and that's where they're bringing Shedway together is something that's bringing together all the different parts of my life, which I feel very lucky to be able to do. Get my travelling carnival circus show fix, I guess, whilst also shearing, which is an incredible challenge and work and sport and the competition side of it, as well as hopefully it's all about making a difference and helping people.
Well, we've mentioned Shedway. I was going to get to Shedway later, but it's perhaps too important to delay. Tell me all about Shedway, what Shedway does and how it came to be.
Shedway is a charity for suicide prevention and mental wellbeing in the shearing sheds across Australia. And it came about because 2 years ago I had been shearing full-time and went back into nursing. I had a job as mental health nurse in the suicide prevention program. So I went from shearing full-time for 18 months back into this mental health nursing role. And while I had been shearing and working in the sheds, it was always on the back of my mind that someone could do something for mental health in the shearing sheds. I know how remote and isolated we are in the shearing sheds, and even getting medical help for something like a broken bone or an injury is really challenging, let alone when we've got the stigma around support for mental health, which stops people reaching out for support as well, and then suicide prevention being a whole other kettle of fish as well. And so, so it was always on the back of my mind with my nursing background, because I'm a nurse before I was working in the shearing sheds. And when I interviewed for my mental health nursing job, I said that I had a dream or an idea of one day doing something for mental health in the sheds. And what happened is that within the first 3 weeks that I was in this job in suicide prevention, the shearing industry had lost 3 shearers to suicide in a very short period of time. And one of those was a young fellow who I had worked with locally here in New South Wales. And so his family and extended family were my work family from the past few years. And that really brought it home to me that, well, we need to do something now. We need to have been doing something already because we are losing people to the sheds. And I knew that the job that I was working in wasn't able to reach into the shearing sheds in a way that was really accessible.
You mentioned isolation as being one issue. What are some of the other issues that are affecting the mental health of shearers in particular?
When we need support, it's really hard to access support, like I said, for any range of issues. And I think when we have inadequate support for anything that's going on in life is when things become harder and harder to deal with, and that's sort of the slippery slope of going to mental illness or suicide risk. And then the other side of it, and what we're doing with Shedway, is sharing the skills to recognise when someone might be at risk of suicide and how to support and help when they're in crisis, how to keep someone safe through crisis. And and then the second part of that of suicide prevention is how to live well as well.
Is that through workshops at the sheds?
So what we do is we run stalls at events like competitions at ag shows and shearing competitions, as well as workshops. And so our workshops, we have a variety of different workshops that we're rolling out. We have a toolbox talk that I've developed as a general talk around mental wellbeing for the shearing shed life. We visit shearing schools or shearing shed team, and the structure of that depends on what suits the team and the day, whether that's 1 hour or 10 minutes at Smoko. And we then, we always make a practice phone call to a phone line such as Lifeline, which is crisis support for suicide risk, and get really great feedback from everyone that seeing how to actually make a phone call to a service like Lifeline make someone more confident to make that call for themselves in the future or help someone else do it. Yeah, up to 70 to 80% more confident than they were before doing that, seeing me do that with them, which is phenomenal. So that's our toolbox talk. And we're also rolling out certified workshops as well. So we run a Shedway forum as a half-day workshop, which includes a safe talk workshop, and that is certified by Living Works around suicide awareness. So we go right into how to recognise when someone might be thinking about suicide or at risk, and how to talk to them and how to connect them to expert help. And we're also training a couple of our team to deliver mental health first aid from later in this year. And we have a few more things in plan as well.
So shearing, I understand, is still fairly male-dominated. Is it challenging to get people to reach out? I mean, I think it's probably always to a degree hard for people to ask for help, but stereotypically men seem to have a harder time.
So much to unpack here.
They don't have to necessarily reach out, you're there.
Our whole team, we are shearers, we are wool handlers, and we are doing the work for ourselves, for each other, for our community. And we're bringing in the expert help when needed, making sure that everything we're doing is professional and evidence-based and so on. And that's how we hope we're breaking the stigma. And I really see we are making impact in that way. And society in general, I think the last few years we've certainly seen a big turnaround in breaking the stigma. When I was growing up, and I think even like talking about feelings, and that was, through my own life, I'm just 40 now, and just for my journey of learning what are my emotions and to name them and talk about them, I wasn't always able to do that. And that's just the start. The basis of mental health literacy is getting to know yourself and recognise where your mood is at.
You mentioned earlier that Shedway was this really nice dovetailing of so much of what you'd done throughout your life, professionally and personally. You worked as a nurse in the Northern Territory. So I understand you went for a year and stayed for 3, mostly in the emergency department, and then worked at Alice Springs. That must have been an experience.
Yeah, I went up to Royal Darwin Hospital for my graduate year as a nurse in 2014 and stayed there for 3 years, and then spent 3 years based in Alice Springs as well. And in Alice Springs, I transitioned into primary healthcare, and I worked for 2 years with Aranda and Western Aranda families running a parenting support program for first-time Aboriginal mothers and their children, which was a wonderful long-term program working with women and their families from pregnancy through till the child was 2 years old. To tie that into with my nursing career was always angling and moving towards mental health care and social support. And then shearing happened accidentally through COVID lockdowns and coming back home to the family farm. And then 5 years later, stepping out back into mental health nursing, and then now into Shedway and bringing it all together.
So I know it's a sad thing to raise, but it's an important part of your journey. Your dad was ill and you went back to the farm to be with him.
So in 2020, if we think back to that strange year that the whole world turned upside down with COVID lockdowns and everything. So at the time of the first border closures here in Australia, we knew our dad wasn't going to see the end of 2020, unfortunately. So when the border closures were announced, my 2 brothers and I all came back to the farm and their families to be with Dad through that time. And yeah, long story short, I'm still here now. When I first came up to the farm, thought it might be a couple of weeks, and I just came with a bag of clothes. And then when they closed the border, I did a 24-hour mad trip to go back across to Victoria and pick up my car and my dog and my ID documents and came back. Through that time, I started working in the shearing sheds, and we're very lucky to work in the shearing sheds through that time, in that we were one of the only jobs that didn't stop work for the most part. You know, we had the animal welfare need to continue shearing, and that meant we were some of the only people still able to drive around and travel for work. And it also made me realise how remote and isolated the sheds really are, because our lifestyle actually didn't change that much. We only get to the shops once a week. We're with the same small amount of people all the time. We work long hours, remote and isolated, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of that is some of what we all love about the job and the work. But I guess it's the two sides of the same coin. The flip side of that is that when there's issues or challenges or extra support needed, it's really hard.
And you found going back to shearing helped you work through your grief after losing your dad?
Yeah, that was really interesting. It was part of working through that grief for me was staying around family as well. Brothers and I, we moved off farm when I was 8, and then grew up, had lives. It was the first for us as siblings to come back together and their families and be around extended family, and also reconnect with our farming family. We're a 5th or 6th generation farming family, and our dad's one of 5 brothers. We have a lot of cousins in the area, so really great to come back as adults and reconnect with the family. And then going to work in the sheds was part of that as well. You know, we grew up in the wool bin, so to speak, as you said at the start. So that was a bit of coming home as well. And then the work itself, we know that physical work is satisfying. It's really good for our mental health as well. It sort of forces you to be social when you don't have to be too social at the same time. I think when someone's got a lot going on, can be really easy to retreat and isolate yourself and stay home and not see anyone. But by going to work, and I have a lot of people telling me this in the sheds as well, that going to work is what has helped us through tough times. And I think it's a combination of doing the physical work, so keeping our bodies moving, we get the endorphins flowing, but also the satisfaction of having a purpose and achieving something with our day, and that accidental or forced socialisation, being around people. We know that an injury that ends a career in the shearing sheds is a time of suicide risk for someone, say a shearer does their back, for example, and then if they were a young fella that came into the sheds, didn't finish school, this is a stereotype, but it's perhaps a typical story. Shearing's been in their family for generations. Their grandfather taught their father, who's taught them, who they're now shearing, and then they shear through to their 30s or 40s and then have an injury and need to stop shearing. The sheds are more than work. It's our whole life. It's our social life, and it's our purpose, and we love it as well. And so to transition out into doing something else when you might not want to is really hard. So we want to get around people in that time. So much to say for all of these topics.
You had found it quite physically taxing yourself, and you were looking at maybe moving out of shearing, and there's this great quote in the article which I'll read, and I still had calluses on my hands and a wool burr in my belly button. And you were, as you said, working in a suicide prevention program, so you felt like you were in a position to do something positive in the shearing industry, which obviously led you to Shedway. So that really started with you talking to people in the sheds and asking what they thought about the idea.
Yeah, that's right, and had 100% positive support. Like a yes, please do something. And we have lost a lot of people, and we do have a lot of people struggling in the sheds, but we all care for each other. And I've really learned from the last 2 years that there is so much support for everyone out there. No one wants to lose anyone else. And that might sound really obvious to say, of course we don't, but when someone's struggling, it can be really easy to feel alone and like no one cares. And so I really hope that whenever anyone hears our story or hears us talking at shows and at workshops and sees the support there is for Shedway as a charity, that is support for all of us that might be struggling, and to take that as hope and action. We have a really strong sense of family in the sheds. When I was working in a shed out near Burke, and one of our shearers had his young son with us for a few days, and this young fellow was about 8 years old, came up and asked if I was his auntie, and I was like, a bit confused, looked at his dad, who explained that he just said how coming into a shearing shed that everyone there is his family, and he explained that we were his aunts and uncles effectively by being extended shearing shed family. And when my car broke down at one point, also near Burke and miles out nowhere, and there was 5 or 6 of us in under it pulling things apart, and the wool broker brought a part out from Dubbo, to add an extra 2 hours to his 8-hour road trip already to bring parts out. We all just get in and get things done. And that's also how Shedway's got the support and growth that we've had in a short time, where Shedway's 2 years old now. It was February 2026, so we're just over 2 years old. And in that 2 years, we've done over 130 events in every state of Australia that has sheep. And, that's a combination of stalls at shows and industry events as well as workshops. And we've had community donations support our growth and establishment, and been working on grants and so on as well, which we're fortunate to have, and so much support for us coming in that, shows the strength of the shearing shed community. If you want something done, get some shearers onto it.
Don't tell me you've been to every one of those events, have you?
Not to everyone, no. We are a team. I'm at home right now in Dubbo. I've just been here for 3.5 weeks now, which is the longest I've spent at home in well over 12 months.
So I think you talked about not seeing role models in shearing when you were growing up. And Karina ends the story with you talking about how doors need to be open for women to pursue their interests. And in a sense, it was just a serendipity that brought you to shearing because you were home because your dad was ill. But that growing up on the land originally, that probably wasn't such a natural progression because you were a woman?
Yeah, absolutely. Little Carol would have never imagined going shearing, wanting to go shearing, let alone Rural Woman of the Year awards. It's phenomenal to be standing here now and look back. For me, I've just followed one thing after the other that interests me. And I think, following interests combined with not liking to be told that I can't do something, I guess, and knuckling down to get stuck into something. And that was a little bit the case with shearing. I certainly had no one expected me to want to go full time or thought that I could. And there's certainly, that like strong independent woman part of me that would be like, of course I can. Women can do anything. But also shearing is phenomenal and ridiculous, really. And it's just pretty crazy that anyone could do it. That job deserves so much respect for whoever does it. So I wasn't necessarily offended that no one thought I could do it, because I didn't really think I could either. I just wanted to have a go when it came to it. And then through the process of learning, one of the fascinations with the job and the work of shearing is the you're in the moment and the instant feedback, and with every blow that you run, whether you're doing a good job or not, and you're constantly, like, every moment working on improving or not. And so it's 8-10 hour workday just goes like that with the hyper focus, I guess. And there's that constant improving, and even people have been shearing for years, and it takes years to refine the skill and get to proficient level. And the number of women in the sheds now is really exploding, and which is great. So the last 5 years, especially through COVID lockdowns, we had a shortage of shearers with the limits on travelling, both within Australia and internationally, because the shearing sheds are a global industry. There's a lot of people that travel a global circuit for work, and then certainly within Australia and within the States. So with limiting the travel, there was doors open for people that were local to get a stand when it may have been harder in the past. And that is great that more people that were there and keen, who happened to be women, were able to get a go, like me. So we now see at shearing schools anywhere from, I think, 30 to 40% of being women in shearing schools, which is great. And the last census in 2021 said that shearers were 96% male. And I think we're coming up to the next census this year or next year. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any change in that.
So you don't hear the call ducks on the pond so much anymore?
I've not ever heard it called out, but, me as well, like, they say in the 80s and so on, that women weren't allowed in the sheds, and that's where ducks on the pond was called out, when women walked in the shed. But we go back to, I was surprised to learn that the very first shearers that were brought to Australia were brought in from Germany when Australia first brought sheep that needed shearing in, and these two shearers were brought from Germany to teach those here how to shear them. And it was two women.
There you go. There's another story there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Those of us shearing and working in the sheds now stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. There has always been women in the sheds, and maybe small in number, and those women shearing through the 80s and 90s when they might not have ever seen any other woman shearing beside them. I really take my hat off to them. It's really fun now to be part of bigger numbers of women coming in to shear. Yeah.
You've got about another 6 months or so as the Rural Woman of the Year. What do you make of that journey so far, and what remains to be done before you pass on the baton to another amazing rural woman?
Everyone that comes through it is forever a part of the alumni, and that is a really strong network. I'm just off a group webinar with our 2025 finalists this morning, with some training that, this is continual opportunities to be part of there. So the next 6 months for me look very busy with Shedway. We'll be out and about across the country with workshops and training for our teams from the shearing sheds, and feeding in some other things in amongst that when we can. And that includes being part of the judging team for next year's team. So I look forward to meeting the new finalists and passing the baton on.
As I said earlier, Carol's story by Karina Balderston is in issue 164 of Outback Magazine. For more information about a subscription or single issues, check out outbackmag.com.au. Thank you so much for being my podcast guest, Carol, and all the best for the rest of your time as Rural Woman of the Year and with your great organisation, Shedway.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
For crisis support or suicide intervention services, call Lifeline on 131114 or go to shedway.org.au. For more information about the AgriFutures Rural Women's Awards, go to agrifutures.com.au. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, Terry Cowley. Editor-in-Chief is Mark Muller. Original theme music by Isaac May.